Why are there so many different Bible translations? And when it comes to Bible translations, there are certain people like, oh, that's just a bad translation. And this is what, for example, the Mormons say a lot. Every time you open up the Bible and quote something that disagrees with them, they just say it's a bad interpretation. Anytime you're interpreting an ancient text, any kind of, it could be Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epimenides, Alexander the Great, could be any work from antiquity, there are 4 different options for translating from the original language into your language. And just so you know, the Bible was originally written largely, the Old Testament is in Hebrew, New Testament is Greek, and a few parts are in Aramaic. So linguistic scholars are working from the ancient manuscripts to the modern languages. There are word-for-word translations, and this is where you need to get it exactly right. How many of you are lawyers, you're accountants, you do tax preparation, you do building codes, okay? You people are into the details. Right, some of you are artists, you're like, I finger paint, I don't know. But for those of you who are in those highly meticulous trades, you're like, no, we need to do the accounting right, we need to do the engineering right, we need to do the legal right. And you can't just sort of feel your way through it. It has to be very specific. That's where word for word can be most helpful, particularly when you're dealing with history or legal documents or measurements or financial amounts. Word for word translations would include the English Standard Version, which I'm preaching out of, the King James Version, the New King James Version, and something called the New American Standard Version, or the New American Standard Bible. Number 2 is thought for thought. There are some things when you go to translate them, if you just go hard wooden literal, you kind of lose the beauty and the poetry of it. So for example, in the Bible, there are entire sections that are poetic. There are whole books of the Bible that are poetry, like the Song of Solomon. How many of you have tried to put poetry into Google Translator and it didn't come out exactly like it should have? Because it gets all the words right, but it doesn't get the heart and the poetry, and it doesn't get the rhyme and the rhythm and the feel and the cadence. Because it's not just the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law. And so then thought for thought would be like the New International Version, which I became a Christian reading. The New Living Translation, which is fantastic, and I love it in the Old Testament. It's a new favorite. And the Contemporary English Version. And then there are paraphrases, and paraphrases don't necessarily pretend to be pure translations. Some of them won't even have the verses, and they're adding words, not to change it, but to try to give context and meaning and hue and color. And this would be, for example, helpful when you get into the songs in the Bible. There's lots of songs. And if you just hand a really great singer-songwriter to an accountant and let him translate, probably not going to get the full impact of what was intended through the song. And so that's where things like paraphrases come in. That would be the Message, the Living Bible, the Amplified Bible, and the Voice. And then the 4th is a corruption. And this is not trying to translate the Bible. This is trying to change the Bible. There's a translation called the New World Translation. The Jehovah's Witness cult uses it. And they have systematically gone through the Bible and removed everything that refers to Jesus as God, except they missed a few too. So when they knock on my door, that's where we start, at my house. But it's their intent to change Jesus. It's their intent to change Jesus. Now, what happens is, some people are like, well, we don't have good translation, or it's been wrongly interpreted. Actually, that's not true. And I've got it in the ebook that I'm giving you. But if you look at all the manuscript evidence, we have far more manuscripts of the Bible than any other ancient piece of literature, far closer to the original with far more consistency. That means the Bible is the most actually trustworthy ancient book in the history of the world. And when it comes to it, the way it would work, particularly in the Old Testament, let's say, for example, I was a scribe or a senior scribe, and then you were a scribe. I would get up with a copy of the Old Testament, and I would read it, and then you would hear it, and then you would write it down. This is before the printing press. You were trained to be a scribe. This is like being a court stenographer. You went to school for this, and this is your career. Is it possible, if you were all writing down, that maybe someone could do misspelling of a word? Maybe some of us, we believe in Jesus, but not punctuation. We may get the punctuation wrong. That's me. How many of us, we heard the word, but we wrote it down because we misheard the word, right? There is a possibility that an error could be made, but then to correct it, there would be a series of editors that would go through all of our manuscripts, and if they found one error, what would they do to that scroll? Burn it. So you have amazing consistency, And occasionally you might have, perchance, a human error. But 97 to 99% of the scriptures can be reconstructed from the ancient manuscripts. There is no debated section of belief or doctrine. The only debates are certain points of spelling or punctuation. But let's say there's 1,000 of us here, and you find 2 that spell a word one way and 998 that spell it the other way. You can come to the conclusion they probably got it wrong. And it's nothing of severity, seriousness, or note.
Thanks for joining me. My name is Pastor Mark. I've been teaching the Bible for more than 3 decades and head-on constant collisions with woke culture. And I would love to get you more Bible teaching. 2 things you can do. Go ahead and watch the sermon in total and also subscribe to the channel. And I'll just keep sending you Bible teaching and we'll have a lot more fun together.